Hello and welcome once again to the Raging Introvert. Today we're going to look at this CNN politics article. Normally I'm going to try to avoid opinion pieces, but I was looking, even though it looks like an opinion piece, as you look through it, it doesn't actually identify as such. In fact, it's The Point by Chris Cilliza, and it says Analysis by Chris Cilliza. So, analysis should be even better for my purposes because it should be very objective and have lots of in-depth analysis of facts and topics, not so much opinion. So that's good for our purposes. Let's see here. The article headline is Donald Trump has now personally attacked 1 in 5 Republican senators. Couple points that jump out on that. First of all, 1 in 5 to me sounds kind of low, at least from what's the general reporting and just the atmosphere, my expectations. I assumed Trump had probably attacked a lot more than 1 in 5 Republican senators by this point. 1 year-ish since the elections and a year and a half or so of all the primary stuff. So that seems kind of low. Second, what jumps out is the words attacked and personally. Attacked is a fairly strong word. I mean, it gets thrown around quite a bit, but he didn't say criticize or anything. It's attacked. And personally could mean one of two things. It could mean, and we'll have to see in the article, it could mean that Trump said things about senators, not through his surrogates, not through his spokesperson, but he personally did it. Or they could be personal attacks, like you're a dishonest liar, lying Ted, or you're a hack, not attacking positions, but the people themselves. So we'll have to see what that is. So before we look at the rest of the article, we're going to play a guessing game. What is the intent of this article? Who's the intended audience based off the headline of what we know? It could be reflective of reality, and reality in this case is that Trump won the primaries, the Republican primary, because a large percentage of the Republican Party base is tired of the Republican establishment promising policies, positions, laws that they support, the Republican voters support, but not delivering. The senators saying those things to get elected, but not actually advocating to enact those policies. In which case, Trump was elected to attack those Republican senators, hold them to account, hold their feet to the fire, and get those policies passed. I'm guessing, and that's why the second place in the primaries was Ted Cruz, someone else who, whether or not you like him, is principled and strongly believes in conservative positions and is not part of the establishment and is not liked by the Republican establishment. Either Trump or Cruz, at least in the view of the Republican voters, would have been pushing for conservative policy positions in regards to possibly immigration, international relationships, Obamacare. Those two were first and second place in the primaries because the voters believed that they would enact those positions, whereas the rest of the establishment people would not. Not only that, but of the two, Trump ended up winning out because he was even further outside the establishment. It was a greater FU to the Republican establishment. People voted for him, if nothing else, to spite the Republican establishment and punish them. So it could be that, or it could be that Chris Cilliza here is trying to show that he is aghast at these unprecedented attacks from Trump against his own party members. And the intended audience is more establishment Republicans trying to help embolden them or make them desperate because they believe they're endangered, desperate enough to attack and fight back and push back against Trump and fan the flames of, well, what looks to me like a growing civil war within the Republican Party. and to target the general public, not Republicans or conservatives or Democrats, just average people who are sitting in a lobby at an airport or whatever, have CNN on, and make the Republican Party look more disorganized. I think of those two positions, I think the second is probably what Chris is aiming for here. And that may bias my opinion as I go into this article, and we'll analyze it a bit more, but this is not a peer-reviewed, double-blind scientific study, so I'm okay with personal bias maybe coming through. Let's take a look. It says, Trump's supposed to meet the Republican senators at Capitol Hill, and he took to Twitter to attack one. This is, I assume, quoting his tweet. Let's see. Quote, Bob Corker, who helped President O give us the bad Iran deal and couldn't get elected dog catcher in Tennessee, is now fighting tax cuts. Corker dropped out of the race in Tennessee when I refused to endorse him, and now is only negative on anything Trump. Look at his record, end quote. Okay, we've got a lot of meat there to digest. Looks pretty typically Trump to me. So, the article continues with, Trump's tweets are A, not true, B, come in response to Corker's appearance on several morning TV shows. Now, that's interesting. This part comes later. The beginning of the article makes it look like Trump just attacked Corker, out of nowhere, but it's actually in response to Corker's appearance on several morning TV shows. And in fact, it has a quote here. This is what Corker said on CBS this morning. Quote, it appears to be the governing model of this White House to purposely divide, which you could say is an attack against Trump. Which, by the way, if you look at Trump's original quote, this doesn't look like a personal attack saying that Corker is personally a bad person. It's just directly from the president, which directly Donald Trump has now directly attacked. Might be a little more appropriate if we're not going to say it's an actual personal attack. Let's see, though. Did Corker actually say anything else? Because this is a fairly mild statement saying that the White House's goal is to purposely divide. Here's another CNN article talking about Corker in the interviews prior to the president's tweet, just earlier that day. Corker, asked in the interview if he should have backed Trump's presidential campaign, said he, quote, would not do that again, end quote. He also said Trump has, quote, great difficulty with the truth, end quote, and that, quote, debasing, end quote, the U.S. would be his prime legacy as president. Great difficulty with the truth kind of sounds like a personal attack to me. The questioner asked, you wouldn't support him again? Corker replied, quote, no way, end quote. Corker said Trump has, quote, proven himself unable to rise to the occasion, end quote. In fact, here's a longer statement here. Quote, I think many of us, me included, have tried to, intervene, and I have had a private dinner and have been with him on multiple occasions to try and create some kind of aspirational approach, if you will, to the way that he conducts himself. I don't think that's possible. He's obviously not going to rise to the occasion as president, end quote. So, funny that these much stronger statements and quotes immediately prior to the president's tweet against Corker were not included in this analysis, because that gives a lot more context as to why Trump might be a little upset with Bob Corker. But according to CNN here, that's only half the equation. That's the B here, coming in response to Corker's appearance, which they've left a lot of context out of. And it should be noted that it's, again, this is not Trump out of nowhere, it's in response. He didn't start it, at least according to this. The second part of the analysis is that Trump's tweets are not true. And apparently, out of all these different points in Trump's tweets, they're going to go with Trump, according to CNN's reporting, not only asked Corker to run again, but said he would endorse him and campaign with him. Corker decided to retire anyway and has turned into a major Trump critic. Now, what jumps out to me first is Trump, according to CNN's reporting, and if you look there's no link. Throughout the rest of this article, he later tweeted as a link. Also, this gem is a link to the Twitter thing. All these links to other articles talking about these subjects and what they're discussing. But this one, which should be a fairly important piece to this article, and a fairly important piece of journalism, they've got their own reporting that's showing that Trump actually supported him when he's publicly saying he didn't. It's strange that there's no link to that CNN report. In fact, as I Google searched and dug around as best I could, I couldn't find that listed anywhere on CNN's site, which is kind of remarkable for such an important piece to this report. And the fact that there's so many other links, it's not like Chris didn't know what he was doing or was unable to make that link, unless he was unable because that actually isn't on their site anywhere. So we'll dig in a little bit more on this not true, and the president actually asked Corker to run again. And if you come down to the article later, they list all 11 senators that Trump has personally attacked, starting with Bob Corker. And we'll spend quite a bit of time on his. Some of the other ones are much easier to analyze and dismiss for the most part. So Corker, obviously I talked about him above. So the president tweeted earlier this month, it says, quote, Senator Bob Corker begged me to endorse him for re-election in Tennessee. I said no, and he dropped out. Said he could not win without my endorsement. He also wanted to be Secretary of State. I said no thanks. He is also largely responsible for the horrendous Iran deal. End quote. So, that's what Trump's tweet has said. Those are the accusations he's made. Are those true? We certainly don't know if Senator Corker begged Trump to re-endorse him for election. We can say that Trump has not endorsed him, and we can say that Corker has dropped out, and I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that if Trump did not endorse Corker, he would not have been reelected. As far as Corker wanting to be Secretary of State, according to this other CNN report, Corker back in November of 2016 knew he was in the mix for Secretary of State of Trump's cabinet, and after he was not selected, he said, it's been an honor to be in the mix, so we'll see what happens. I think it's safe to say that he probably would have liked to be Secretary of State, because he didn't come out and say right away he did not want to be Secretary of State, and who wouldn't? He's a politician. Politicians usually want to keep moving forward and have aspirations, and being Secretary of State would be a major step up for him. So I think this part is probably true, and whether or not Trump actually said no thanks or shouted no thanks, it is true that he was not selected for that position. So this is looking pretty truthful overall from Trump. The last part, he's largely responsible for the horrendous Iran deal. And, this one is, who knows? This whole thing was a cluster with the Iran deal. And if you go to, fact-checking stuff, fact-check Trump's false claim that Corker supported the Iran deal, you'll find articles on every possible angle on this, saying Corker did or didn't. This is CNN. They're saying it's false. Corker didn't support it. But if you go to National Review, a pretty establishment-friendly conservative site, they're going to say they're critical that the Iran deal should have been submitted as a treaty to the Senate, but it wouldn't have been passed because ratification of a treaty takes 2/3. Obama could have just done it as some kind of executive, I don't want to say executive order, but just a president-to-president type of arrangement, not officially endorsed by Congress, can be overturned by the next president, which is a little iffy, but it's been done. But then again, it can be overdone, it can be overturned, it's got some legal issues. So instead, Congress passes the Corker-Cardin bill, which allows it to pass a resolution of disapproval, barring the president from waiving sanctions, which is not how the Congress in the treaty ratification procedure is supposed to go. And Corker, his name is on the freaking bill that makes it that it is a treaty, kind of, it's approved by Congress, but Congress can, instead of approving it up front, Congress can disapprove it later. And this is a conservative concern here. The Corker-Cardin bill is worth less than nothing because it set up a deeply flawed process that turned the Constitution on its head. Agreements of this importance are supposed to be submitted as treaties and ratified by 2/3, and it allows it allows it to be stopped in Congress. This whole thing of saying it's not correct in Congress stopping it can be held up by a filibuster and vetoed that way. So a minority in Congress can stop Congress from disapproving the Iran deal, which is not how it's supposed to work. So CNN can report what it wants and say that Corker is not responsible for it, or he isn't, but he was the head of the Foreign Relations Committee. There's a reason he was looked at for Secretary of State, and the bill that sidestepped the constitutional process, he's a co-sponsor of. His name's on the bill. So, yes, yes, he is to some degree largely responsible. He could have come out against that arrangement and that bill and that deal and stopped it. So, we got Bob Corker. I'm thinking Trump's statements are a little more honest here. And if you go back to this one, if we're looking at the timeline, way back in April 2016, Corker's playing the typical Republican game at the time of saying, well, I'm not going to endorse Trump because he's an outsider, he's not establishment, and he's going to attack me because I'm the problem that the Republican voters see, and Trump is going to come and kick me. So I'm not going to endorse him because he's against me, and I don't want him to win. But I'm going to say I support him because I don't want to piss off Trump's voters and potentially hurt myself in the future. So I'm walking that fine line in the middle. Okay, Trump's doing better. May 2016. Good meeting. Short list for vice president. I'm on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, so maybe I got some other policy stuff. November 2016. He's in the mix for Secretary of State, so Corker's going to play nice. Maybe he can move up. Corker isn't selected, and then May 2017, Corker says the White House is in a downward spiral. August, Corker says Trump hasn't demonstrated the stability or competence to be successful. Is it surprising that after that Trump starts firing back and being critical of Corker, who's been attacking him? I don't think that's unusual or strange at all. Next, we have Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz was his final primary opponent in the primaries, and it even says here, Trump has largely left Lion Ted alone since the campaign for president. They were rivals. The rivalry's over, and they've moved on. Big deal. Jeff Flake. Oh, look. It starts off, Flake wrote an entire book critical of Trump and the Republican Party that has so quickly accepted the one-time businessman's takeover of the party. Never one to let a slight go unanswered. Okay, so Flake was critical and Trump hit back. That sounds reasonable to me. Trump has also huddled with several potential primary opponents planning runs against Flake. An absolutely unheard of move by a sitting incumbent. Now, there's no link here. So I'll take them at their word, although I find it hard to believe that never in history has a sitting incumbent helped try to overthrow an incumbent in a primary challenge. But it's possible. But Trump isn't a traditional or typical Republican. And again, he was elected to stir things up, break up the establishment control of the party, and get people in that better represent the views of the Republican voting public, not the establishment. Let's see here. Lindsey Graham. After Graham was critical of Trump's statement, Trump tweeted this. Okay, so Graham was critical of Trump. Trump hit back. Very, very in-depth analysis there. What a surprise. Dan Heller. Trump's at a meeting with a large group of GOP senators talking about health care. In the meeting, he issued a not very veiled threat to Heller, who faces a primary challenge from his ideological right. Again, which is kind of what Trump's about. Getting moderates out, breaking up the establishment, and getting representatives that will push for the right. Quote, this was the one we were worried about. You weren't there, but you're gonna be. You're gonna be. Look, he wants to remain a senator, doesn't he? End quote. I've read that multiple times, and I still don't know what the hell they're trying to say, or Trump was trying to say. So I went to the other CNN article a little more in depth about that incident, and he's got a bigger quote. So he's sitting with this group of GOP senators. Dean Heller is right next to him, and he says, in reference to Senator Heller, quote, this was the one we were worried about. You weren't there, but you're gonna be. You're gonna be. Look, he wants to remain a senator, doesn't he? And I think the people of your state, which I know very well, I think they're gonna appreciate what you hopefully will do. Any senator who votes against starting debate is really telling America that you're fine with Obamacare. But being fine with Obamacare isn't enough for another reason, because it's gone, it's failed, it's not going to be around. Heller's reaction to Trump's comments is literally priceless, which I don't think that's literally priceless, but in fact, I don't even know what that's supposed to be showing me. That doesn't look shocking at all. But this quote makes a little more sense now. Ultimately, what he's saying is, look, the healthcare debate's coming up. The Republican voters are not happy with Obamacare. They're expecting us to repeal and replace, like we've been promising for the last 7 freaking years. And senators have been voting to repeal it while Obama is in office, so it has no chance of being passed. But now that we have a Republican in Congress, or a Republican president, they're expecting us to follow through what we've promised for 7 years. And the voters in your state are not going to be happy if you betray them. That's not joking. Yeah, he's joking, but as everyone knows, he's not. He's delivering a threat. I don't know if it's necessarily a threat. It's a statement of fact. If you betray your voters on what you've been promising and what they want, there's going to be a consequence. And yes, I would think Trump is completely in the right to support a primary challenger if Heller or any other senator, like McCain, tries to run for re-election after betraying their voters, after promising something for so many years. That doesn't sound surprising or shocking to me. I don't even know is it an attack? Does that count as a personal attack from Trump? I don't know. That's what they're indicating here, though. Good old John McCain. Let's see. No Republican senators clashed more or for longer with Trump than McCain. They've had a sketchy relationship since the summer of 2015, when Trump said he didn't consider McCain a real war hero because he'd been captured. Now, here's a link, which is great, because this should bring us to that article, and it should start with Trump out of nowhere saying he doesn't consider McCain a real war hero because he'd been captured. Based off of how this reads, I'm assuming that's the start, and it wasn't a response from Trump to something that McCain said previously. So let's take a look. Now, and looking through here, also by the same author of the previous article, it just starts with, in July, Trump coming out of nowhere and saying he's not a war hero. He was a war hero because he was captured. I like people who weren't captured. And there's nothing prior to that. Is that the whole story? Where's Paul Harvey? Paul, what's the rest of the story? From this Arizona Central article, it goes back to June 2015, a little bit before that Trump quote. And McCain's putting distance between himself and celebrity billionaire. Quote, I just disagree with his comments about the, quote, Mexicans. A little bit later, talking about a Trump rally that's coming to Phoenix. There's a story that says McCain and Flake want no part of Trump's Phoenix rally. And McCain says, quote, I just think that it is offensive to not only Hispanic citizenry, but other citizenry. But he's entitled to say what he wants to say, but I guarantee you the overwhelming majority in Arizona do not agree with his attitude that he has displayed toward our Hispanic citizens. We love them. So, a little bit negative on Trump. And Trump at his rally, and again, this is what got him elected, because he says, quote, we have incompetent politicians. Not only the president, I mean, right here in your own state, you have John McCain, who subsequently, as we've seen, has voted against repeal of Obamacare after he had voted for it and kept saying he wanted it, who films videos of himself saying, just build the dang wall or build a dang fence, talking about increasing border security during election time, but not once it comes time to actually push for it in the Senate. So, that's a legitimate criticism. And he even says, after the event, it says hammered him, quote, I've supported John McCain, but he's very weak on immigration. Yes. That's true. If the right person runs against John McCain, he will lose. Well, we can certainly say he lost to Obama, and he is weak on immigration. People are voting for him because he's the incumbent in Arizona. It's a Republican state. But that's still all prior to the quote they mentioned in the other article about disparaging his POW status. Following those quotes here, the New Yorker publishes McCain's reaction to the Arizona rally. Quote, this performance with our friend out in Phoenix is very hurtful to me because what he did was he fired up the crazies. Yes, now you're attacking the Republican base and the Republican voters and calling them crazies. So obviously Trump's going to hit back, and that's what Trump does. He hits back. The whole trend, every one of these, except for his actual primary opponents, the trend, which isn't being discussed here, is Bob Corker attacked him, Trump hits back. Jeff Flake attacks him, Trump hits back. Lindsey Graham criticizes Trump, Trump hits back. Dean Heller is the only example in this particular case. It wasn't a primary opponent where it's expected to attack them. And Trump isn't necessarily attacking him. Trump is just, legitimately. It's a not very veiled threat. It's, look, your voters want this bill. I want this bill. If you don't support this bill, your voter is going to be unhappy, and I may help a challenger against you to get a representative that represents their views better. Yeah, that's a threat. Is it a personal attack? I don't know, but it's legitimate. McCain was putting distance and disparaging Trump. Trump hit back. McCain hit back harder, and Trump hit back harder. No big surprise. Mitch McConnell. Following the failure to pass health care reform over the summer, Trump lashed out at McConnell. Okay? Is that a personal attack? Putting the blame for the failure on the Senate GOP leader. He is the leader of the Republicans in the Senate. He has led them to passing the bill multiple times in the past when it was guaranteed to fail. He's been public about how important it is to repeal Obamacare, how bad Obamacare is for the nation, and multiple election cycles he's been saying, well, we need more Republicans We can't repeal it without the House. We got the House. We can't repeal it without the Senate. We got the Senate. Okay, well, we can't repeal it without the presidency. Now you got the presidency. You got everything you wanted, everything you asked for, everything's in place, and you failed to deliver. Who else are you going to blame? Look, here's the quote from Trump. Can you believe that Mitch McConnell, who has screamed repeal and replace for 7 years, couldn't get it done? Must repeal and replace Obamacare. This is Trump's tweet. Is that I guess you could say that's an attack. It's also a statement of fact. Lisa Murkowski. Murkowski, who had previously voted to repeal Obamacare, joined with McCain and Senator Collins to suddenly vote against the repeal and replace effort. So Trump tweeted her, Senator Lisa Murkowski of the great state of Alaska really let the Republicans and our country down yesterday. Too bad. That's a personal attack. Again, I don't know if I would consider that an attack, Chris, but I would certainly say it's an accurate statement, and it's a betrayal of her constituents who she promised she was against Obamacare and would vote to repeal it, who she voted to repeal it in the past when it had no chance of passing, so she could pretend that she wanted to repeal it just to get votes from her constituents. But when she actually has the opportunity to do it, she betrays them and turns out to be lying to them. Rand Paul, let's see, what is his personal attack against Donald Trump? It starts off at the very beginning. Paul and Trump have developed a close relationship over the last few months, but it wasn't always so. Quote, Rand Paul is a friend of mine, but he is such a negative force when it comes to fixing health care, Trump tweeted last month. Quote, Graham Cassidy bill is great, ends Ocare. That, I must be missing something. Okay, back in the primaries, he attacked Rand Paul, who is one of his opponents. Quote, first of all, Rand Paul shouldn't even be on this stage. He got number 11. He's got 1% in the polls. And how he got up here, there's far too many people anyway. Well, it's true. There were far too many people on the stage at one time. Rand Paul was not going to win. He had a tiny, tiny percentage of voters. So I can see that. Is that an attack against him? I suppose in the weakest sense of the term. And again, that was during the primary, where he's supposed to be attacking because they're opponents. And this thing up here, starting off with saying he's their friends, or they have a close friendship, and Trump says he's a friend of mine. But he's a negative force when it comes to fixing healthcare. Well, that's probably true because Rand Paul has very strong principled beliefs and doesn't want to do a wishy-washy, half-assed job of repealing it. Is that an attack? Is that a criticism? Is it a gripe? I think Chris is going a little crazy here with some of these examples of personal attacks from Trump against sitting senators. Rubio was his primary opponent, so he attacked him. And look, there's nothing else since the primaries listed here. Done. Ben Sasse. Trump hasn't attacked Sasse by name much, but when he did, it was a classic. Quote, Ben Sasse looks more like a gym rat than a U.S. senator. How the hell did he ever get elected? Trump tweeted in January 2016. And that's it. So, Trump apparently came out of nowhere and just attacked Ben Sasse for no reason in January 2016. At least that's what this little snippet here would lead me to believe. Based on every other thing above, I'm going to guess that's not the true story, and Trump was responding to something Sasse said. Let's take a look and see if Chris is leaving something out here. Oh, the link only brings me to Donald Trump's original tweet. That's kind of weird. Well, we got the date here, 29 January 2016. So let's just do a quick search and see if anything pops up from Sasse, just, shortly before that. Oh, wait, look at this. January 24th, so just a few days before, Ben Sasse asks a bunch of questions, kind of challenging Trump on his positions and statements, including one here, question 4, you brag about many affairs with married women. Have you repented? To harm children and spouses, do you think it matters? I can see where Trump might be a little upset about that. Oh, and then let's see. Sass's office released a statement saying he was heading to Iowa to campaign with Rubio, Cruz, and, quote, possibly other constitutional candidates. Quote, we are at a moment of constitutional crisis. America already has one post-constitutional party. We don't need another. I'm pro-Constitution, and if that makes me anti-Trump, that's Mr. Trump's problem, end quote. And, at a press conference in Marshalltown, Trump was asked about that Sass tweet about the marital affairs, and Trump said, quote, it's a cheap shot. Look, of course it's a cheap shot. So, yeah, I can see where Trump may have tweeted something back. Again, he didn't start it. He responded to attacks from Ben Sass with his tweet, but Chris, for whatever reason, decided not to mention that in his roll-up here. He just made it look like Trump is this raging maniac who attacks Republican senators out of nowhere for no reason, when I think in every example it's either been a primary opponent or someone who attacked him or criticized him first and he punched back, except we have Senator Heller, who he gave a veiled threat saying, hey, vote against this bill like your constituents want, or I may support an opponent and you may lose. Mitch McConnell, who has failed to deliver based off his leadership position. Lisa Murkowski, who betrayed her constituents. And again, these attacks, just saying that you let down Republicans in the country yesterday because you betrayed your voters and changed your vote. Rand Paul? Is this even an attack? He's a friend. He's a negative force when it comes to fixing healthcare. I mean, unbelievable. So there's a lot of analysis that could be done, but there's not a lot of analysis actually being done. It's a clickbait, catchy headline to make it look like Trump is out of control and the Republican Party is in chaos, when really Trump is delivering exactly what he was supposed to deliver. He's holding Republicans accountable, holding their feet to the fire, and in some ways not buckling to the immense amount of pressure that's being put on him, and instead staying true to what he was put in there for. Ultimately, Trump doesn't want to become the presidential version of Mitch McConnell or Barack Obama, making lots of promises and then delivering on very few of them, if any. So, long analysis for a fairly short, simple article, but it just goes to show how out of touch and dishonest some of these people are, trying to portray one angle to a story when it's not really supported by the facts that are brought up. And there's a lot of misguided disingenuousness that's been presented in here.